Welcome to the OnStage podcast. I'm your host, Chris Robert, and today I'm joined by my co-host, multi-instrumentalist and classical crossover artist, James A. Norkawich, who's also a good friend. Our guest today is New York native Christopher Macchio, an internationally acclaimed tenor renowned for his powerful and emotive voice that seamlessly blends classical elegance with modern appeal. Christopher discovered his singing talent during his high school years and pursued formal training at the Manhattan School of Music. He has performed at prestigious venues such as Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center, and his repertoire includes classical crossover music that resonates with audiences worldwide, including us. Christopher has graced opera stages worldwide and continues to enchant audiences with his extraordinary performances. Beyond his musical achievements, he has fascinating background, including a passion for race cars, inherited from his father Dennis, who was the owner of an economics forecasting firm. Christopher performs in, listen to this, James. Christopher performs in multiple languages: Italian, French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Farsi, Hindi, wow, Russian, Turkish, Hebrew, and Arabic. Incredible gentleman here. His career highlights include performances at the White House, Madison Square Garden, and the 2020 Republican National Convention, where he captivated listeners with renditions of Nessun Dorma and God Bless America. In addition to his musical achievements, Christopher has ventured into acting. Listen to this. Appearing in films like Cabrini and Don Q, starring Armando Asante, Mambo Kings, right? So his collaborations with renowned artists and producers, including David Foster, we all know, Grammy winners Peabo Bryson and El Jardine of the Beach Boys, and American Idol finalist Haley Reinhart, have fully solidified his status in the music industry. As a member of the New York Tenors, Christopher continues to tour internationally, bringing his unique blend of classical and contemporary music to diverse audiences. His dedication to his craft and his ability to connect with listeners on an emotional level make him a standout figure in the world of classical crossover music. He has released 2 studio albums, Dulce Momenti and a Christmas album entitled Oh Holy Night, showcasing his versatility and passion for music. His recordings reflect a fusion of classical and modern musical influences. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Macchio. Is it Macchio or Macchio?
Macchio. Yeah.
Macchio.
The
Thank you for
Karate
being here.
Kid doesn't
Yeah,
use the authentic Italian pronunciation, but I think his sounds cooler, but mine's the accurate one.
but you're not related to him, of course.
Not as far as I know, but I've always been a huge fan. So
Well, thank you for being here, Christopher Macchio, tenor, world-renowned American tenor. How are you? And
thank you
thank you
so
for
much.
being.
It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Jim, for being here as my co-host. I think you're going to enjoy this one.
Thank you. Oh, most definitely. And if I may start off by asking, so you being the presidential tenor and representing our country, actually we're neighbors. You're in New York, I'm in Connecticut, so we're not that far away.
Oh wow.
Um,
Okay. Where in Connecticut?
I'm in Glastonbury. So if you know Laura Ingle from Fox News, she actually grew up in Glastonbury, and
Oh wow.
yeah, so
Okay.
just we have a lot of connections. We'll probably get into into that later.
Right. Wow. Laura
Um,
Ingram was from
Laura
there.
Ingram,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, no, because we it almost sounded like you said Laura Ingalls. I'm like, you mean the girl from Little
Yeah,
House on
no,
the
Little
Prairie?
House on the Prairie. I'll be Charles Ingalls today.
you know
Oh my goodness.
where I have to start, and I think it's probably the most important and poignant thing as a musician, as a vocalist, and as someone who is again the voice of our country. When you're standing there in the rotunda, and you're standing there in the Capitol, and you've got everyone, the eyes of the world surrounding you. What's going on in your head at that moment? vocally what's going on, and how are you taking this all in and getting in preparation to perform on the nation's biggest stage?
Well, the short answer is don't mess up. that's that's in there. Believe me. Really, before I took the stage, I was a little nervous because I had been doing so many interviews before that performance, and performances themselves. I had done 2 nights before the largest private fireworks display ever in the history of the world, that took place at Trump's golf course in Sterling, uh, with Jeff Bezos and a bunch of other dignitaries with us. And I sang to millions of dollars worth of fireworks choreographed to my voice. And so I was competing with a lot, singing outside in the cold, but they did have heaters, but it was still cold. But so I was very vocally not in the best shape. So I ended up in a position where I had zero margin for error. Typically, I've been blessed. I can take a stage and deliver a performance, and I do have usually a little bit of margin for error, where I can be free and just have fun with it. And I couldn't really approach it that way that morning because like I said, the voice was not in a great shape. And I was gargling with tea, honey, and salt water beforehand. And so I was hyper focused on the technique, on making sure that I had full command of the instrument, the voice, fully supported, because it could very easily have gotten away from me if I had gotten distracted for a minute. And it was very hard not to get distracted, because all of the most powerful people in the entire world were in that small space.
Wow.
And all the former presidents that are still alive, and the other heads of state, and all of the CEOs of the largest companies in the world, and every politician that that you've seen, on the news or on television, and all this. And now I'm seeing these faces, some of which for the first time in real life, staring at me. And depending on what side of the aisle they're on, they might be hoping for a positive result or for a negative result. You don't really know what's going through people's minds. So I had to not be distracted by any of that, and just be hyper focused on walking what ended up being a tightrope, a technical tightrope. And so, by the grace of God, and I do give God credit for, first of all, giving me the gift that I have of the voice in the first place, and I'm always mindful of that and always grateful of that. And then on that day, I did pray on my knees at my at bedside in the hotel before I left for the Capitol. I did a couple of Our Fathers and a couple of Hail Marys, and it worked out. But I didn't take anything for granted that morning, so I understood that I had been entrusted with what I considered to be a sacred responsibility to deliver our national anthem, a piece, the music and words of which are intended to unite the country. And so it was my intention to deliver a performance that both preserved the dignity inherent to that piece and to the occasion, and also unified, hopefully, the country a little bit behind that patriotic message, in a way that would justify the faith that President Trump had placed in me, in handpicking me for this opportunity and this responsibility.
And you know what is just so phenomenal? It's a testament to the gift that God has given you, and also to your talent, is the fact that the acoustics in that particular that space. I mean, it's everything goes up. So it's when the news began to cover it, and as things, and as the tension started to build and the anticipation started to build, you really set that canvas. And as a musician, as a fellow citizen in this beautiful country, you really did the nation's anthem a just an amazing rendition of it, because you brought the heart, you brought that soul back. And it's not often that you get to say that to another artist and say, that you really encapsulated everything that the words mean, that the words say. And I think when we, growing up, especially, and we get that, growing up when you're young, you don't really pay attention to what the words mean until you get older, and how much they, the people that have gone past in before us passed away and who have served, our veterans, our current servicemen. What does it mean, and what does it mean to our country? And you brought it to life, and we thank you for that.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. That was the intent, and it was just a real privilege, to be there in that space at this point in history for an occasion like that. And I'm very grateful to President Trump for providing that opportunity, that platform, and for the country for being so warm and welcoming in their response to what I did.
That's very amazing, Christopher. I would like to ask what inspired you to pursue a career in classical crossover music. Can you share about your background?
Well, originally I had no desire whatsoever to perform or to pursue music in any way. And in high school, uh, I ended up having to take, and don't get me wrong, I love music. And I guess when I was about 13, I kind of discovered I was listening to the soundtrack of The Godfather Part 3, and there's crooning music, there's jazz, and there's opera on that soundtrack because the different parts of the plot. Harry Connick and Al Martino, and then some opera, somebody from Cavalleria Rusticana. And I was able at that age to deliver what I considered to be a pretty successful facsimile, of those pieces, all of them. And I said to myself, wow, I could do jazz, I could do, this old crooner stuff, and I can even do opera, that's kind of cool. And I just left it at that, wanted to keep it a secret. And a couple of years later, I had to take chorus to satisfy a New York State graduation requirement. And I was really hopeful that I could just, benefit from the relative anonymity of having 100 kids around me. One day, the choir director asked each of us to perform one by one solo, so he could
Wow.
rebalance the ensemble and move people around. And I just got sick to my stomach. I said, nope, I'm not doing it. Fail me, throw me out. I don't care. I'm not singing in front of these kids. So he gave up in the moment. He said, all right, I'll talk to you after class. So everyone left at the end of class, and he pulled me aside and said, okay, now it's just you and me. Please sing for me so I can, figure out where to place you. I sang for him, and I knew I had the ability to carry a tune, and I knew my voice at least sounded what I considered to be a little better than the kids that I had heard earlier earlier in class. I said, he's probably going to tell me, you see, you had nothing to worry about, and send me on my way. And instead, I started singing, and the song got to a high part, and he just couldn't believe what he heard. Oh my God, I can't believe this voice, blah, blah, blah. He goes over to the file cabinet, starts pulling music out of the file cabinet. He's playing, what about this? What about this? Can you sing this? Can you sing this? And, at the end of it all, he just sat me down, and he looks me in the eye and asks me what exactly I intended to do with my life. And at the time, I was thinking about law school, maybe medical school, but probably law school. And he said, Christopher, you have a gift and an obligation to share that gift. And it was only then that I realized I took his words to heart. He was an extremely talented musician in his own right, and for him to sit down and make that clear to me, I said, I guess there's something to this. I guess my suspicions that I suppressed were correct, and maybe I do have an obligation to share this gift. And it was really the reactions that people would have emotionally, and my growing awareness over time that the performances that I was delivering had this emotional impact and reached people in a way that when my focus had been previously strictly academic, I had never really had an avenue to connect with people that way. And so, being a reserved person, it was just an amazing vehicle for me to connect with my fellow human beings and make them feel something special. And they would come to me and kind of pull me out of my reserve by needing in their need to convey, what they felt after having heard me. And I'm down in Delray Beach right now, and I went to a restaurant. I'm a sucker for Italian food, and I oh my God, it was a really great food, by the way. Arturo's in Del Toro, in Del Rey, and some people recognized me from the inauguration, and so I'm just trying to mind my own business and have dinner, and they tentatively say, "You look familiar. You're that guy from the inauguration," and just for them to share what it meant to them, it means a great deal. And so my increasing awareness of that is really what inspired me and then sustained my efforts, because some people are very fortunate to have relatively quick success, at a young age. And for me, especially because of my natural reserve of personality, it took a lot longer uh, for me to really get out there enough for the right things to fall into place. And so it's what had sustained me through all that were the reactions from people, and these anecdotal moments where I would have these genuine, authentic connections, powerful connections. And I really, it really underscored as for me, that those kinds of powerful articulations of the human condition and and the capacity for those articulations to connect people is really what the arts are ultimately all about. And so it's a privilege to be endowed with whatever uh, I might have at my disposal to facilitate those kind of connections. And so I'm very grateful for all of it. Really saved me in a way, because I anticipated not having an avenue to connect with people this way. And then my life ended up you know completely in the opposite direction, and my profession ended up being connecting with people in that way. So again, I'm just very grateful.
That's amazing, Christopher, because your life could have gone a different direction. Like when we talked about you were told, "So, okay, everyone does a solo," and you're like, no, I'm not, absolutely not doing it. If you had just walked away, you could have been working for your father. You could have been anything, but you became this
Oh
world
yeah.
famous tenor, and you're amazing. You're perfect, and it's great.
Yeah, I mean, you never know how things unfold. Maybe there would have been some other opportunity that came along that you know
Mhm.
uh dragged me out of my shell. But yeah, it was for me that ended up being that pivotal moment. And there I guess there are still forks in the road even after that, because again, it was a struggle for me after the conservatory. How exactly do I start this music career? What are the mechanics? What do I do? um and again, not being someone who just had the burning desire to perform for its own sake. uh it wasn't like I was in finding a pub to sing in every night, just to constantly be out there. So for a long time I was performing like once a year someplace and trying to figure out. I was staying in college, getting other degrees, and not sure. And at the end of when I turned 30, I said, enough is enough, and I started studying for the LSAT, and I was going to go to law school,
Mm.
and one of those once a year performances that I did had introduced me to somebody who that person became aware of a PBS television special being cast, and they wanted me to audition along with them because they remembered how my performance was when I had worked
Wow.
with them that one time, and and so they put five people together, uh, and I was one of the five, and then the PBS and the EMI records at the time ended up signing me, uh, just me out of the five. But I wouldn't have known it had I not made an impact on. Uh, I wouldn't have known that about that opportunity if I had not made an impact on that woman. So I'm grateful to her as well for getting the ball rolling and sustaining my career. Even though after that project, it didn't pan out the way that they thought. The EMI had gone bankrupt, and so our contracts ended up getting canceled. But getting that close, getting on television, on channel,
Mhm.
on PBS, that was enough to say I got my first taste of music at a professional level. I remember the first time I went into the studio in Manhattan. All of these flight cases were still in the lobby of the studio, and the flight cases had spray painted in white on them U2. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
holy, shit, like, I'm going into a studio to sing today, and U2's stuff is still here. So
Wow.
that made, they had just left. They had rented the studio like the day before. So I said, you know what? Okay, this is really, I've got to stick with this no matter what. And so, and that's what I did. And it was, a struggle until the last, few years where things really came together, and I went from just eking out a living to actually having some general success, which I'm very grateful for.
Well, here's a scenario, Christopher. Let's say that you walk in and you bump into Bono. What would you say to him?
Well, I guess it depends on the context, 'cause, I know he's got his own political views on things, and so it depends. But I would, of course, at the end of the day, say that as a one artist to another, I have a great admiration for the heart and soul that he's put into his craft, and to his willingness, uh, to leverage his profile and platform and his talents to these philanthropic efforts. And so he and I don't necessarily need to agree on everything to agree that it's such a worthwhile um, way to spend one's time and energy in the furtherance of the interest of, of the greater good for mankind. And I think that he has played a very important part in that over the last few decades. And so I would thank him for that, and thank him, of course, just for, coincidentally having provided me some tangential inspiration as well, to stick it out with this career. If I could get that close to Bono, I must be on the right track. So I appreciate that as well.
Chris, a quick two-part question. And being a musician as well, we all go through. I can identify with being at a conservatory, and it's like, okay, I'm here. I graduated. What next? I don't want to do the bar scene. I don't want to, I don't want to get and be labeled in this particular platform, so to speak. So that being said, was there ever a point where you wanted to give up and quit?
Yeah, I was I had this girlfriend who was a gastroenterologist, and she was giving me a little bit of a hard time, telling me to get a real job. And and I said maybe she's right. Maybe I don't like how she's conveying this message to me, but maybe she's got something. Maybe I just need to move on, and because there were certain things that in my case, certain sacrifices that were required as far as life milestones, getting married, having children at a certain time, you know, and I had to, and I still am far delayed in those things relative to the biological ideal, chronologically. You want to have kids in your 20s, ideally. Most people these days have delayed at least until their 30s, and that's a societal thing. And now, me, because I'm a musician, I ended up, now I'm in my 40s and I'm looking to start all that. So,
Mm.
it was, I definitely had thoughts about giving it up. I think I probably was would have still had some intent to circle back to it, quote unquote. But the reason that it had taken me a while to even get to that point. I could have pursued law right out of the conservatory as a hedge on my bets, as a backup, but I didn't want to, really pursue a legitimate backup, because I thought, and I think rightly so, that it would have drained and sapped like the sense of urgency this to really pursue the music thing. And I forget what cultural touchstone says this, but they talk about, don't have a backup, like that's the worst thing you could do, you know, if you really want success. You fail, you have to put yourself in a failure is not an option scenario. And so, you know, I I think I'm just glad that I was rescued from this dynamic where, oh well, I'll make some money and then I'll settle. I'll get my ducks in a row and then I'll go back to it. That probably wasn't going to be how it turned out. So again, I'm just very grateful that the universe intervened and dispelled whatever thoughts I was having with flirting with the law school education.
And do you think your faith had a lot to play with it as well? I mean,
Well, I guess insofar as I I did, and I still believe that it was endowed by God, whatever gifts any of us have. Uh, Obviously, I was born into this world, and there are certain things that I think made a conscious decision to cultivate, to pursue, but having a voice wasn't really one of them. I was either born with it, or I could have even been born with it or not. Just like nothing that I could do in this world was gonna make me be able to dunk a basketball. You know, uh, and so I don't hold that against myself either. But if I had been born 7 feet tall, I couldn't really go around, bragging about, I can dunk a basketball. Well, no kidding. God made you 7 feet tall. So I try to approach music with a similar kind of awareness and humility. You're not better or worse than anybody. I just have a certain instrument that I was given. The one thing I can say is that it makes collaborations easier from an ego point of view, because for me, because I like to say I have the luxury of being magnanimous.
Mm.
I can invite anybody to be on stage with me, and I'm not worried about being upstaged, or I don't have to worry in the back of my mind, at least not vocally. Sometimes I think twice before having a gorgeous woman on stage next to me, because I'm like, I really have to hit the gym really hard for about a year before I'm gonna be comfortable with a supermodel with a voice next to me. But so that's the only thing. But vocally, I'm very lucky. I can invite or collaborate with anybody, and I don't have to put my ego in check. And unless somebody resurrected Maestro Pavarotti from the grave, which I would be more than happy to play second fiddle to Maestro Pavarotti, please, by all means, but otherwise, I'm in a pretty good position, and again, I'm conscious that it's something I ought to be grateful for, and I am.
Yeah, I can see that. Uh, that's an amazing story, Christopher. So eventually, how did you become a member of the New York Tenors? How did that come to be?
Well, they had the leader of the group, or the genesis of the group, was a guy named Andy Cooney, who is an Irish tenor and
Oh,
in the
yes,
Irish
yes.
music scene.
Wow.
He decided that he wanted to put together a super group and like kind of like put three tenors together, and his unique take on the three tenor concept was going to be the New York tenors. And so he had himself, and then Daniel Rodriguez, the singing policeman from 9/11, to
Wow.
represent the Hispanic community, and then he
Nice.
had another singer who purported himself to be Italian, but turned out he was Polish. But his whole turns out his whole persona was Italian, and who could blame him? I mean, I like to say, you've heard people say there's two kinds of people: Italians and people who want to be Italian. So I know I'm biased, but he certainly seemed to fall into that category. Anyway, so he actually, out of the three, was a big ticket draw, and but they did not get along with him personality wise. And we talk about ego. There was apparently ego involved, and they would all wear black the three of them were supposed to wear black tuxedos, and then he would show up to the gig in a white tuxedo, so he stood out, and he stood, could stand in the middle. So anyway, so they were at a crossroads, and they were about to disband the group altogether. And then somebody said, well, why don't you just try to find another guy? And they said, well, who are we going to find? And then somebody had suggested me. And so we we met at a diner, and I was essentially interviewed. And then they put me on a probationary gig. And they flew in these executives from Nashville and to observe how I did at this trial gig on Long Island. And I got standing ovations, and everybody loved it. And so afterwards, all the executives looked around and said, well, obviously he's the guy. Let's do this. So so that's how I ended up becoming the third member of the New York Tenors.
I like to hear those stories. So now eventually you got a chance to work with the legendary producer David Foster. Now, James and I were talking about David Foster, so we thought we'd ask you what it was like working with him.
Are we allowed to curse on this podcast?
No. Like a pure Italian.
We don't have a guy. We don't have a producer with a bleeper in the back. Well, I was going to quote him because he's a colorful personality, and it was actually an impromptu thing. And the truth is probably even more, is more fun than what the reality could if it had. Basically what happened is there was an event that he does the music for every year called Celebrity Fight Night. And it's Muhammad Ali's charity where he raises money for cerebral palsy. And so it takes place in Scottsdale, Arizona. It usually has like Bocelli and Josh Groban and Reba McEntire and a whole stable of David Foster artists for whom he has written hit songs over the years. Peter Cetera and all these people. And anyway, one of the people that was involved in the event basically snuck me in. They snuck me past security. They distracted this big African American security guy, and I slipped in, and then I was told that by that person, I spoke with the board, and they don't want you to sing. You're a no name and blah blah blah.
Really?
So
Wow.
yeah. At this time, this was like 10 years ago, and they're like, no one's really, we have all these Grammy award winning artists here. No one knows. David doesn't know who the heck you are. So I said, all right, and I sat down and I started talking to this, PR lady that I was sitting next to, and I was just going to enjoy the evening. And somebody that I had performed for, a wealthy woman, just randomly saw me and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm running into you here." She lives on Long Island. She had hired me for a gig on Long Island. Now we're in Scottsdale, Arizona. I said, she's like, "You're amazing." She's like, "Are you singing tonight?" I said, "No, they don't have room for me. There's, all these big artists here. They've got more than enough talent. So they don't need me." She goes, "This is BS." So she goes to Lani Ali, the widow of Muhammad Ali. She said, "This is Christopher Macchio. He is amazing. You've got to let him sing." So then Lani Ali, Muhammad Ali's widow, calls up to David Foster, who was rehearsing the band on the stage. "Hey, David, this guy's got to sing." And David's like, "No, we're not doing that whole thing where I let somebody from the audience." He's like, "No, this is not the time and place for that. We're not doing it." And she goes, "No, you got to let him do it, blah, 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 blah." And the people start saying, "Let him sing, let him sing, let him sing." So he goes, "All right, Christopher." Oh, he's like, "All right, get over here." So I go and I start going up the steps. He goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, slow your roll there, buddy." He's like, "Let's see what you got first." And he hands me the microphone. And I start performing Nessun Dorma. And he just couldn't believe what he heard. He's like, "Oh my God, blah, 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 blah."
Mic drop.
And we run up the
Yeah.
stairs, and the band picks up, and starts playing along with I had started a cappella. Now the band is playing along with the Nessun Dorma. I had started in the right key, and and so I get I finish it up, vincero, vincero at the end, standing ovation. Everybody goes crazy. David's like, "Wow, I can't believe it. Where the hell did you even come from?" Blah, 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 blah. And, and then the people are like, "Encore, encore." And at the front dais, the honoree table was like Harrison Ford and all these celebrities and everything. And they're like, "One more song, one more song." So he goes, "What would you like to sing, Christopher?" And I said, "The Prayer." He goes, "Well, I wrote that.
Whoa.
I wrote that for Bocelli and Celine Dion." I said, "That's why I picked it." So
Wow.
we start the prayer, and it so happens that song, once I really get going as a tenor, sometime, at least at that time, 10 years ago, I would lose the bottom notes. And that song actually has a pretty big range on it. So it goes kind of low in the beginning. La luce che tu dai nel cuore
Free concert.
resterà. Right? So it's low for a tenor. So I had gotten in the habit of doing an alternate melody that I thought suited my voice better. So I started doing that, and he stops like in the middle of a bar, and he's just like, "What the hell is that?" And
Oh
this is
no!
in front of 1,000 celebrities. He goes, "Don't F with my melody. Sing it the way I wrote it." Yeah, that's what he said. So I was like, okay. So then I just sang it the way it's written, and everybody was happy. And again, it ended up with a standing ovation. And so I got a little taste of that he's apparently can be a stickler, at least when it comes to stuff that he's written. So but it was a great honor to work or to deliver a performance with him in a space like that, with all of these Oscar-winning celebrities and musicians, and to get that kind of reception. I mean, people, honestly, they gave polite applause to all these like Grammy Award winners, but they really gave me a huge enthusiastic standing ovation for both of those songs. And so that was really, again, like a wonderful experience. And now his girl was trying to take my information down, and that the very same person that had that snuck me in kind of spirited me away, because he thought in that moment, oh, they're going to take him over and they're going to, and then I'll never be able to, essentially, use this kid for any of his purposes again. And that was unfortunate. That was a little bit short-sighted on that person's part. But now it's funny. I have a gala coming up in DC, and guess who the guest of honor is for that gala? David Foster. So sometimes, you get a second go around, because, these things can really be life changing. And so, at this next event, I'll be free to, to really to hopefully develop more of a relationship, and hopefully have a collaboration that'll really amount to something. I mean, if he could, for example, write me a hit song, that's really all it takes to get to even the next level. I mean, I'm very grateful for the success that I've had, and especially recently. But if I could have a chart-topping song written by David Foster, that would definitely be another huge step up. And you go from making whatever, you go from making 50 grand a night to $1 million a night, just like
Wow.
that, when
That's
you
next
have a
level.
hit song like that. So that's really, if I could reach those kind of audiences and go from 1,000-seat theaters to Madison Square Garden residencies, or something like that. I mean, those kind of artists, they sell out, those big venues, and you're just reaching millions of people on a regular basis. And and somebody, for example, like Bocelli, in collaboration with David Foster as a classical crossover artist, has introduced so hundreds of millions of people to opera, even if he's not strictly an opera singer
Yes.
per se, but it's opera light and it's opera adjacent, and it has that same flavor to it, and it's a nice gateway for people, an accessible gateway for people to enjoy music with a more classical sensibility. Break out the wine and cheese and put on a little ambient Bocelli in the background. And I think those things are important, and I want to carry on that legacy, and maybe even break into additional genres and make an even bigger impact. So that would be my ultimate larger goal, and if I could make any progress towards that, I would be extremely grateful.
That sounds interesting. Do you think your upbringing in an Italian American family influenced your whole musical journey?
Insofar as from my parents themselves, I think their tastes, unavoidably influenced me, just in terms of that kind of, it's almost like a stew, all these different ingredients, the music that you absorb as a child. Um, and so just as two parents listening to their respective musical genres, that had an impact. And but from an Italian standpoint, they didn't so much listen to opera or classical or Italian music per se, but being Italian and growing up in an Italian household as an unavoidable impact, often in regards to this innate passion that you approach everything in life with. And so, in addition to having been exposed to different genres of music, I approach my music with the same passion that my family and many other Italian families approach all the things in life that they do, whether it's cooking, whether it's the maintenance of the home, construction, and all the myriad other things that people are familiar with, as far as the contributions of Italians. But at the end of the day, it's that passion that's palpable, that people respond to it viscerally. And you can, there's obviously different elements to it, but the important part is the authenticity. I mean, you can you can fake intensity, I guess, to a degree, but if you really, really put your heart and soul into it, then it comes across, and it impacts people in an authentic way, and that's a really huge part of of what makes in my mind, defines a successful artist.
Crazy question. So you were talking about fire and passion, and so when it comes to classical crossover or even outside of classical crossover, like you said, so if I were to look at Christopher's playlist and your influences in terms of musical stylings, whether it be R&B, whether it be classical, whether it be pop, we're relatively the same, almost the same age. So I'm curious to ask you, what would I see if I were to actually look at that? Because that usually has the staying power of it gives you who you are, and then it defines who you are, and then everything branches off from there. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think you're gonna find, first of all, an eclectic list of different artists. I mean, it's partly it's partly a function of when I grew up, but it's also just like, for example, I love technology. I'm a techie guy, and so I'll even have electronic dance music on the playlist, even though it's not art, usually artsy per se. There's like a time and a place. If I'm driving for a few hours and I just put on a certain kind of, thing that keeps me in that like tunnel zone, and get from point A to point B and that kind of thing. So you'd see some of that, but and many other genres. And I'm not like a huge heavy metal guy, but there are certain heavy metal songs that just resonate for whatever reason. And some of it is, a specific moment in time that you're nostalgic for, or an association that you make with it. But I think if I was to try to find like a common thread or an overarching theme, center of gravity in all of it, it would probably be, you know, uh, like a real emotional sentimentality. I think that what I really love are these emotionally charged ballads, you know, more so than anything else, more so than just something that's fast and fun. I'm not a party guy. I don't drink, so you know, anything that's like that's not my bag.
Mhm.
I'm uh really about just that longing, that passion. And I just happen to grow up in it. Like you bring up David Foster, he wrote some of these really
Oh yeah.
wonderful, beautiful love
Yeah.
ballads. And
Hmm.
so that's the stuff that resonates with me, that touches me. Um, Even going back before my time to like Connie Francis, this
Oh,
voice
wow.
that uh, would just kind of break your heart, and so, all the genres that represent, you're going to see Rat Pack, you're going to see Frank Sinatra, all that stuff.
Oh.
But, you know,
Wow. All
uh,
the good people.
but at the end of the day, I think I just really, really, I could just listen to those love songs over and over and over again. And so regardless of what I sing, again, it's I between that and and just that Italian passion, that's what is imbued into my performances, so it's yeah, and I really, really enjoy that very much.
Yeah. Wow. So when you were at Manhattan School Music Conservatory, what was your experience like? Like, what did they teach you at the beginning, and how did it help you grow
Well,
as a musician?
I mean, obviously, they want to ground you in the rudiments of music itself. And they did make a little bit of a distinction. There was a little bit of a distinction between instrumentalists and singers. And so The instrumentalists, because what they're doing requires more of a conscious awareness of what notes you're playing, they were held to a little bit of a higher standard with respect to theory and dictation and certain things.
Mm.
But as a singer, you still had to, learn about all that stuff. I'm just acknowledging there was a little bit of a distinction there. And I say that because the dynamic between students, it was like, the singers get more up front and center attention and glory in a way, but the instrumentalists regarded themselves as a little bit more serious musicians,
Mm.
as compared to the singers. And there was some rationale for that, and I'm acknowledging that. So yeah. But at the end of the day, all of us were expected to learn some theory and dictation and all that kind of stuff. And my school, Manhattan School of Music, was at the time the top jazz school conservatory also. So I was in the classical department, but then there were a lot of jazz. It was also half jazz. And my first roommate was a jazz musician, and we did not get along at all. I'd be going to sleep. I went to sleep with what I thought was late at 12 o'clock, and for him, He was just going out, and he'd come home, and with the vodka following him into the room as he closed the door, like I could smell it. And I was like, wow, okay, so this is and he would just jam at night at these smoky jazz clubs, and that was different lifestyle. So after the first semester, we switched, and I got a classical, another tenor actually, which was a whole nother thing. 2 tenor egos in one small room. That's another combustible mix, but at least at least temperamentally, it was a little more aligned. It was just too aligned, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But so that was it was just an interesting, and also that conservatory in particular, but a lot of conservatories, very international. So 60% of the student body in that school, it's actually in the old Juilliard building on 122nd and Broadway, before they had moved Juilliard to Lincoln Center. And that building, so the building had a lot of history, and it was an international school. 60% of the people there were from abroad. And, it was very, very clear in the cafeteria of all places that there was this international UN dynamic, because United Nations dynamic, because you were not allowed, you were unofficially prohibited from sitting at the table that was associated with one ethnicity or another. So, there was the American, like 4 or 5 American tables, and then you didn't sit at the Russian table or the Korean table or the Japanese. It doesn't matter if there was no Japanese students sitting there at the moment, but they could be along any minute.
Wow.
And you don't want to be caught at the Korean table when you're not a Korean. So, it was really funny like that with the lunch table, like assigned seat, unofficially assigned seating. But I really loved it. And, just, absorbing all of that culture and music. And music was relatively new to me. Like I said, I had kind of avoided it, and so I was relatively new to it. A lot of these kids had been doing it, since they were 6 years old. And so it was a real time for artistic, discovery and growth for me. And again, it's just another thing I'm grateful for, that kind of opportunity.
It's really kind of funny, Christopher, because you growing up in New York, I growing up in Connecticut, and going to school in the tri-state area, we definitely share, the same passions. What I'm wondering now as we look back, because when we were in school and we see, like, again, kids were taking guitar lessons or piano lessons or vocal lessons, where things are right now, and again, the America First initiative is everything's coming back to where it should be. Do you think? I mean, I've actually emailed the president. Haven't heard back. Sent snail mail. but would love to see that us get back to where we were musically, because
Yeah.
music can help kids at risk youth, kids who who, I mean, music develops the sciences, the mathematics, and all these other things. Where I'm getting at is that the binding connector of what music can do, and even dance, or or painting, or what have you. It's taken a back seat, and because of technology, everybody's carrying a phone, and there's nothing wrong with
Oh
that.
yeah.
I'm a tech geek too. What's your opinion on that? Just that whole dynamics of where music and
Well,
arts and
well,
school.
for my entire life, I have had this general sense that our culture had been getting increasingly vulgar and coarsened. And I was concerned by that. I was drawn during my formative years to content, whether it be on television or musically or in the other arts, that had an innate wholesomeness to it, that seemed to promote values that uplifted and ennobled people, as opposed to the opposite. And I was seeing the opposite too often, where uh, the implicit message in this music and then film and television was that people are, low, that they're low creatures, that uh, that they should be ashamed, that animals are noble and man is evil and against nature, and we should be ashamed of ourselves. And of course that even got further amplified with racial dynamics, and certain people should be more ashamed than others about who they are and what their ancestors did and all this kind of stuff. And I really never bought into any of that, and I felt that it was clear to me, even as a kid, that the culture was playing a toxic role in perpetuating and amplifying those kinds of messages that now we can, of course, see the results of, whether it's the drug use and
Mhm.
suicide rates going through the roof, and just all kinds of negative outcomes that are quantifiable, that you could see on the metrics and the data. So I definitely believe that there's now an opportunity to press the reset button, and it's not some kind of unwarranted reactionary dynamic, but really just a return to common sense principles that had formed the bedrock of the civilization that we live in for not only decades, but hundreds and even thousands of years. It was understood all throughout history that certain realities of who we are as people, as a species, were what they are. And somehow there are certain forces that have seen some kind of utility in trying to subvert those clear realities that we can all see with our five senses and with our common sense. So I think that the arts and culture, having played a role in degrading our culture and having a toxic role, can of course have a remedial medicinal role, can, in a sense, and can be a salve that can guide the trajectory of public discourse and the general feeling that people have about themselves and who they are and their place in a society and in the world and in the universe, can be uplifted and be reminded that actually man is noble and capable of wonderful, noble things, and has a special place in the world and in the universe. And those ought to be, in my view, the messages that uh, that arts that the arts convey. Again, I said earlier, the articulation of the human condition, and that's really, what I think where they're best used, the arts. So whether and all across all disciplines, you can have
Mhm.
vulgar dance
For
that
sure.
that again that conveys the sense that man is just this creepy, vile, perverse, decadent kind of creature, or you can have dance that is elegant and um speaks to our
Impressive.
nobler inclinations and more refined sensibilities. And so that's really what I intend to do. I have been very fortunate to have been appointed to by the new administration to the National Endowment for the Arts, and that new role for me in this new chapter of my life will be an opportunity to exert at least some influence in how the arts are to move forward with respect to funding and guidance and policy. And the National Endowment for the Arts has really funds a lot of different projects in all kinds of disciplines, whether it's museums, fine arts, painting, sculpture, and dance, and the performance of music and so forth, film. So all of those things can be brought under the rubric of we're going to ennoble our fellow citizens and empower them to believe in themselves and hold themselves to lofty ideal standards rather than being resigned to baser instincts. And so maintaining that kind of positivity, I don't want to approach it from a negative standpoint or a standpoint of censorship, which I don't believe in. I think that provided the right opportunity, that people, appealing to the higher sensibility will always win out against appealing to the prurient interest, as long as we focus on the right values. And of course, schools also play a vital role in that. It's all interconnected. All of these messages, all the messaging has to be in harmony, to use a musical metaphor. It all has to be aligned and in sync, whether what they're hearing from their president, what they're hearing on the news, and what they're hearing on their, AirPods, and the music they listen to on the internet and so forth. It all has to add up to something that makes them feel special. Not special in the sense that they're entitled to anything, but special in the sense that they are part of a noble species that is capable of great things, and therefore they themselves are also capable of achieving their dreams, of achieving great things. And that's the message we need to drive home over and over again until it's received properly.
That's very interesting, Christopher. Sorry, Jim.
I was just going to say, you brought up something that is key, is that the dynamics, and very quickly have been for such a long time, that the shift on either side has been, you can't do this, these opportunities aren't here for you, and if they are, they're only for the upper elite, or the ones who are privileged and endowed, and if you live in Greenwich, Connecticut, that opportunity for you is going to be more prevalent than it is for someone in, say, Hartford, or the outskirts of Boston, or Chicago, or LA. And when we begin to have this narrative and start speaking and opening things up and saying, this is all merit based, these things are open to you because of what you can do. And it's kind of the old thing: if you teach a man how to fish, he'll eat for 1,000 years. But if you don't teach him how to fish, you're really setting them up for failure, by not doing the right thing. And that's personally what I love, what you're doing with the National Endowment for the Arts. I personally was like in a program like that in high school, where as part of your high school day, you went to college, earned college credits, but it was on a lower scale, and there weren't that many opportunities. And the only thing is, it was in a beta phase, and they really couldn't see whether it could work or could not work. And that's, I think, where things over the decades have fallen, and kids have fallen off the grid, because what opportunities are there for them? How can they be someone like yourself? How can they go out and emulate what you're doing and how you're doing it and put your style and put your narrative to it? And what you're doing is exactly is I support like 1,000% because it's never been done and now it is being done. And that's it's a lot of work, a lot ahead, but you know, you always have people who are behind in standing in the back here, ready to work in the wings. You know what I mean?
There's definitely a lot of work to be done, and you know, I'm humble enough to understand that I'm not an expert in all disciplines, so I've begun the process of assembling a team of people that are experts in their respective disciplines that'll be able to inform some of this as far as how exactly do we guide the evolution and the investments that we want to make in the arts and all these different disciplines. And yeah, hopefully we can really get back to that place where people are reminded, you know, there's a difference between being conscious that maybe they're, you know, that they're two things can be true at the same time. There can be certain environments or circumstances that are more advantageous than others, and that has always been the case, and that always will be the case. But just as true is the notion that the relative advantage or disadvantage provided by those different contexts are vastly overblown and certainly not insurmountable. And when somebody has something, the good news is that long ago we advanced as a society to the point where anybody who really has some merit and you know does have the opportunity to cultivate it and to get to the next level. And we've seen myriad examples of that coming to fruition. So no child need be resigned or feel that they are the victim of you know, the excuses being made available to them. They have the opportunity and the responsibility to you know, to take the very real tangible you know, gifts that they've been given. Any child, for example, born in this country has just, in the grand scheme of things, such a tremendous leg up on anyone else born in any other country.
Oh,
So it's almost like you're trying to articulate the plight of the man with a 160 IQ because
Oh
he
wow.
doesn't compared to the guy with a 180 IQ, you know. And meanwhile, the rest of the world has a 100 IQ. You know, just if you were to make like use IQ as like a, you know, as a metaphor for it, you know. So anyone born in this country, there's no excuse. Get
no.
it in gear and work hard, and you will see the fruits of your labors, and we will celebrate those successes just as full-throatedly as we celebrate anyone else's. And so that's the beauty of this country. And you know, rather than a regression, one of the really cool things about AI is that it is going to further democratize the access to human knowledge and wisdom and the conveyance of those things, you know. With all due respect to the teachers unions, you know, there may come a day where AI is a better teacher than, you know, any teacher ever could be. At least in terms of, you know, certain things, you know, where the human component is less important than the conceptual collation of all of the concepts and tailored to that individual. You know, it's impossible for a flesh and blood teacher to tailor their lesson plan to 30 different children with different backgrounds and different aptitudes and different skill sets and all that. But an AI can do it in the blink of an eye at, you know, in the future. And so, you know, the responsibility will shift, and you know, the human connection will be able to be leveraged in other ways, and the conveyance of baseline information will become a rather simple matter. And so I think we could look forward to that future, just like how a lot of musicians, I can see yourself, you've got some equipment back there. Looks
just
like
just a few items, just a few.
I mean, the three of us, we could do so much more in our homes than could have been done in a studio, or in a lot of studios 50 years ago, 60 years ago.
It's true.
So so they're really so you're gonna see I think a real leveling of the playing field, so to speak. And being born in Greenwich and going to Eton isn't going to really mean what it did 80 years ago, going forward with how everything is shifting. And I think that'll be great, but like you said, at the end of the day, I'm an Apple guy, not and I never used to be. When I was so this is my evolution, right? Before music, I was a techie guy, and I didn't like Apple because it kind of uses that walled garden approach to remove the nuts and bolts of what is happening on a computer from the user. And when you're a tech nerd, you want to see those nuts and bolts. You like that. It's like being a car enthusiast and being able to tweak the carburetor versus the computer in the car doing everything, And so I wanted to be involved in all that. And I didn't like that Apple kind of, took it away and walled it off from me. But then, I started to see some of the positive sides of Apple. One of their ethos that was articulated by Steve Jobs is that they wanted to position themselves at the nexus of technology and the arts. And they would have like a street sign, and one says technology, one says arts.
Yeah.
And they really, really do just such a wonderful job with that. And that's really, I think, how the future is going to leverage technology to enhance art in ways that we haven't that we can't quite foresee right now. But it has to be done with the right values. It really, and you talk about the sciences. The other part of that equation, he said, the sciences, getting the sciences right is what the sciences allow us to sustain life, but the arts make life worth living.
Yes.
And so I think that the more we can leverage technology to kind of take care of the mendacities of everyday life, then the more time that we can focus our energies spiritually and intellectually on these higher, more lofty goals that the arts, I think, represent a huge part of.
But would you really want an AI sing opera and sing Nessun Dorma better than you?
No. I want AI taking care of all the distractions that prevent me, that take away from my time to sing. That's it. I mean, wouldn't I love to study my music? Like if I have to drive, if I, God forbid my chauffeur calls out sick. One day I hope, right? But right now I drive myself to gigs or whatever, and wouldn't it be nice to have the AI driving and I'm sitting there, just giving another look over at the scores and this and that, So what? No?
I don't like self-driving cars. You never know when some hacker's
not right now because
right in.
it's not quite there yet. But eventually, I hope that Don't get me wrong. So my father's a race car driver. I drive like very, very fast. That's one. I mentioned earlier, I don't drink alcohol. I never tried any drugs. But what I do like to do is drive fast. And so if I am focused on driving, I have fun with it. I've been dodging the police down here in Delray because they yeah. But I just love it, And but at the same time, there are just so many things you do during the day, and you're like, one day it'll be Rosie the robot, like the Jetsons, and you can just focus on your music, focus on your art, not on folding laundry, God forbid. So, hopefully we'll get there. We'll get there.
Or time traveling DeLorean.
Love that movie. Love that movie.
Chris, you're talking about humans are decadent and you're humble enough. When you did Nessun Dorma, which is a great opera by Turandot by Puccini, you're singing in front of the president. What made you prevent getting arrogance and said, look at me, Josh Groban isn't here, I am. What keeps you humble?
I think what makes it easier is, again, in my case, it's not something that I just, for some people, it's clear to me that they want the attention and they want, focus to be on them. And then they start from there and say, okay, now what skills do I have that I could actually, achieve this? And I say, oh, well, let me learn how to play guitar, and then all the chicks will look at me and I'll get attention or whatever. And, and for me, it was the opposite. It was the music and the awareness of what I had and the fact that I needed to be sharing this that started the process. And the performing is just a reluctant reality that that's what it means to share your gift. You have to perform. And so I've maintained that kind of dynamic where it's the art first and me second. And that was reinforced as I matured as a performer. Originally I would step on stage and I would, first of all, I'm very reserved. My first performance, I got a standing ovation. I ran off stage like I was so uncomfortable.
Really?
I was like, oh God, what are you guys crazy? I'm out of here. And they were like, where'd he go? Where'd the kid go? We're giving him is he still back there? Somebody get that kid back on. So I just ran out. It was too embarrassing to have all these people, reacting that way. And then I slowly realized that part of the grace of an artist is to be able to accept that energy. Because even yesterday, it's like people come up to me at the dinner table, and it's not that I don't want to be bothered. I'm just, it's still a little bit embarrassing, I don't, a little bit. I'm like, wow, you really, first of all, because I'm never really 100% satisfied with my performances. And so they're like, oh, it was the most amazing thing I ever heard. And I'm like, I wish I could say the same, but it's, I don't, I'm glad you feel about it. I have my own thoughts, So I'm my own worst critic, and I always have been. And so that's the other part of it is, I stay humble because I'm just thinking, how this, as I'm going, I'm like, how can I tweak this? How can I make it better? And the third thing is, again, I used to go on stage and I was worried that it was about me and that the audience was there in part to render judgment on me because it was about me.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to give me the thumbs up or a thumbs down, like Caesar. And they were like, all right, you think you're good? You think you're good enough to be on this stage? Let's see what you got, kid. And I really thought that's what they, and then I realized that, it's actually not about me at all. I'm just a facilitator, that it's about them. I'm one person on stage and there's 1,000 or more people in the crowd. So obviously the logic of it is that it's this whole thing here that we're all here. It's about the 1,000 people, not about the one schmuck on stage. And I realized that my only purpose in being that one guy on stage is, it's just my responsibility. I've been selected. I'm the designated facilitator that day, in that moment, to create the atmosphere for everybody to connect with each other and to have a human experience. And So that actually took the pressure off, because I said, now I realized, even if I'm not perfect, it doesn't really matter. I will always feel an obligation to give my all and do my best. But at the end of the day, it's not a perfect result that is what I'm after. That's not the goal. Oh, praise Jesus. He finally delivered like the objectively perfect performance of all time. Like, you know, it's like, no, it's really just about that 1,000 people or the 10,000 people. Not about, I'm a facilitator, and it's about their night. It's about making that night. You know, they just had dinner, they just came from home, whatever they got, and now they want to have a nice time, a nice night out, you know, or they want to turn on the TV and they want to see the president make a speech, and they want to feel something nice and uplifting. And that's my job, not to make myself, to convince everybody how great I am or that I'm perfect or whatever. You know, they just have to feel something good about themselves, because we're all people. And if I can remind them of something good about themselves and about the reality of their membership in the human race, then that's really the goal. And so that, if you can maintain that perspective and that goal, then the rest of it takes care of itself. You're humble by default.
That's where people, like, you're probably one of 8 people that I know in the industry. You know, it's not about you. You're being the facilitator, telling the story. You can't be the storyteller and say, I'm also, you know, I'm reading you the book, but I'm also the author and I'm also the publisher. And, you know, and then after I'm done reading the book, you must praise me for what has been written, because it's all about me. And again, to have that and to know that, you know, I always wonder why people never got it. And you know, you never want to question the narrative, but you go, okay, well, you know, there are artists that totally, their thing is that they, you know, in other genres, they do what they do, and it's like, look how great I am. But you've been in these settings, and especially the one coming up on the 29th, like, you know, you've been in these settings where you've taken the back seat and facilitated the music and let the emotion. And what I love so much about you is, maybe we were separated at birth, I don't know.
Your brother, there you go. You found it.
Is the thing is just, you know, I gravitate towards the love songs. I gravitate towards the Gino Vanellis, to Chicago, to, you know, all those music songs growing up that made you feel a certain song at that moment. Eric Carmen. I mean, I can go on.
Oh, wow.
Days.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
all
know,
that.
when you sing All by Myself with your voice, you know, you're setting a whole different, you know, background, as if you would, you know, if someone else doing something that is, you know, again, they're laser focused on their own, you know, ideals and everything else. But
Yeah. In my view, it's because they're under a misapprehension. They're operating in this industry like under a false premise. You know? And then you can see that because of that, they're always trying to fill an unfillable void, and then they end up, you know, on the floor of their hotel room with a bottle of pills, and you know, and that's it. And because they completely missed the point.
And that's unfortunately is becoming all too common. And that's, you know, to your point earlier, where our children are looking at this, and their teenagers and even kids in their 20s as these are our role models. These are the people who are setting, you know, the whole culture up for us. And if it's a culture of failure, it's how are you going to have adults who are going to grow into make positive choices and set up, sustainable this and sustainable that? It's not going to happen. But so what's coming up on the 29th? I'm enthralled to see what's
29th is going to be a show at the Paramount Theater in Huntington, Long Island, and we're going to have some great musicians on stage with us, and it's going to be an opportunity for me just to come home after having traveled around and perform for the country, and now just deliver, a performance for my hometown crowd, and we're going to celebrate all of the components of our community that makes it what it is, and our police, our fire and first responders, and our military.
Oh, wow.
And just the fact that having grown up in suburbia, just outside of New York City, that we have on Long Island in the tri-state area, like a unique kind of dynamic where you've got a lot of cultural gravitas in New York City, but if you're in the suburbs, you have the sanity and the tranquility and the values that can be maintained in the less dense environment. So I want to take this opportunity to celebrate those values that we share on Long Island, and of course, like I said, appreciation for all those different parts of our community that hold it together, bind us together, and of course the fact that all of us, at the end of the day, regardless of our ideologies, we really do love this country at the end of the day, and we're going to celebrate that as well. We love good music, and we love our country, and that's very, very critical, especially now.
Now, these are upcoming performances in Germany, Spain, and Austria that you're doing?
Yes, that's going to be Germany, in those countries. So there's a political dynamic in Europe where, just like we're putting America first here, where Europe has to kind of reestablish what it means to be a European, and to safeguard the integrity of their own cultures. There are certain parts of the world that you don't have to teach this lesson to. No one needs to tell China it needs to maintain its Chinese identity. They do it by default. Nobody needs to tell Japan that they're racist for not watering down the integrity of Japanese culture. And so I think that it's, a lot of folks in Europe are coming to the realization that just because they were the continent that engaged in global colonialism, that there need not be a penalty for that, where their own cultures are cannibalized from the inside out, and sublimated by the very cultures that they colonized 150 years ago. It's an absurd dynamic, and it's not racist for them to say, hey, we welcome the existence and to be visited by all these different cultures, but we would like to reassert the essential nature of what has always defined who we are. And so some of these concerts are going to be in support and in celebration of that reawakening European identity that really, I think is going to be a beautiful thing for them.
I was dying to ask you this question, Christopher. Now, it says that you sing in Italian and French, but Hindi, Russian, Turkish, Hebrew, and Arabic? Like, how do you keep track of each language? How do you do that?
Well, first of all, just to be factually accurate, I'm not fluent in those languages. I can't converse. What I do is I can perform certain songs phonetically. So let's say I was to go and try to do a Hindi performance, then I look at the words and I look at the translations, and I I get all of the and I actually took a semester of Hindi in college, and I really love because connecting with people is so central to what I see my purpose as an artist. Adding those additional languages, it doesn't take much. I don't need to. I'll never be. It's unlikely I'll ever do a 2-hour concert in Hindi. But if I were to go to Mumbai or someplace in India, I could probably get away with singing 95% in English and Italian, and then just do a song or two in Hindi. And just that one song or two would have an outsized impact in their ability to connect with me and to see me as somebody who validates and appreciates as an outsider their culture as well. So I'm sharing my culture with them, and also showing my appreciation as an artist for their culture, and doing it justice, hopefully, with a rendition of some of their music in a way that they might not have heard before. When I was in college, I was asked to sing in Farsi, the Persian language of Iran. And I told the girl who asked me, I said, I have no idea. I don't know one word in Farsi. Forget it. And she said, "No, I'll show you the phonetics, and I'll show you what each word means." So I did it, and I delivered this performance, and I didn't even trust my memory. I had my cheat sheet in front of me. I had an iPad, with the words, and the crowd went crazy, and they absolutely loved it. Because and they told me afterwards, like, oh, I never heard the Farsi in opera style, and that was so they thought it was really cool, because they just, they hear it performed in traditional styles, and I did it like a operatic take on it. And then I had the opportunity to go to Marrakesh, and I did O Sole Mio. I had somebody translate O Sole Mio into Arabic. And so I did it. And I had it was for Royal Air Morocco, the airlines over there. And that had belly dancers around me. And I was singing the O Sole Mio. And they loved it. I was in the paper. They loved it. I was in the paper over there. So again, they appreciate when it's a sincere effort, not when it's a satire, of course, but when you actually appreciate. And so with the Hindi or the Farsi or Arabic, I do have an appreciation for those cultures. I do listen to all the languages that you mentioned earlier. I do have those represented on my playlists. And I listen to Turkish music and Russian music in the car. And I like, getting that flavor, into my auditory space. I just enjoy it. And you can channel some of that cultural energy. You hear the Russian song, and it's got a certain Eastern kind of feel to it. And even when it's a major song, it's kind of still got the little bit of Eastern Slavic melancholy imbued into it. And it's just has a unique flavor. And I just love that stuff. I find, again, we said that the purpose of art is the articulation of the human condition. Human condition itself is such an intrinsically interesting thing. And so whether it's psychology, sociology, all of that, and the arts are just such a powerful insight into those dynamics in different cultures. And so you can glean some of the values that are salient in these cultures just by listening to the music, what the words mean, if you can find a translation, and what the sensibilities and aesthetics are based on the the instruments they use, and the melodies and the chord structures and so forth. So I just find it, just fascinating. So I really enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like Hebrew and Arabic is so similar, but you had to get the phonetics right. I sang in Italian, and I had a literal Italian opera singer tell me, "Okay, but you have to roll your R's. It's not nessun dorma, it's nessun dorma." And
Dorma,
yeah,
yeah.
dorma. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the rolling of the R's is you got to train the tongue, but yeah, absolutely.
Now, with our 250th anniversary coming up, do you see
yeah.
you being a part of?
Oh, did somebody say something to you? I don't know what kind
Well,
of prep you guys had. I mean, that's he must be psychic. He's gonna put on that Johnny Carson hat, with the Karnak. He's got now.
I put the
Someone
letter.
tells me, like,
Christopher, it's funny. I've always, you can ask my wife about this too. I've always been able to just read things and call things. You see things that are
really?
happening.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
just
was
walk.
about to I was gonna text my PR guy and give him props for like that extra bit of interview prep, but no, actually, it's funny you say that. So, yes, I've been approached by people in the administration on potentially going around with President Trump next year.
Wow.
Um,
Oh
I
man.
think he's going to um, visit all 50 states as part of celebrating the 250th anniversary of our country. And there's a chance that I might be performing in those states and be part of, serve as a musical component to some of those celebrations. And of course, if I am able to travel around on Air Force One, that'll be another experience of a lifetime,
Next
to
level,
be able
yeah.
to serve our president and to serve our
Mhm.
country in that capacity for
I
such an auspicious occasion like the
Wow.
250th anniversary would be amazing.
I wonder. I wonder what it's like, and I can only fathom what and to speak to him, to speak to our vice president. I mean, there's so many people in the cabinet. It's like the perfect
I've got
band.
I've got half of the cabinet in my phone.
Wow. And Donald Trump's probably phone number as well.
If you ever want to share, we can exchange info.
What's cool is that they're very down to earth people, because it's about merit and it's not about standing
DEI.
on pomp and ceremony and who has X amount of PhDs and this and that and the other. It's people who the president knows have the commitment, loyalty, and vision to, carry out what he believes needs to be carried out and to serve the
Mhm.
country with all their heart and soul. And so it's been a privilege to get to know some of them. I hope to get to know the rest soon. And it is, uh, a, you know, when I'm sure, hopefully you guys will get to meet the president at some point if you haven't already. And um, it's the same that I just said about these folks, where they're just down to earth and committed. The same can be said of him. He has larger than life personality traits and visions for what's possible for himself and his family, and then now the country. But as far as how he carries himself, uh, it's very down to earth and just he's extremely gracious, which I think is an element that gets underappreciated or under highlighted in the mainstream media.
Mm.
Um, you can pick up once you know him, then you can pick it up more easily when he makes speeches and stuff, and understand better where it's coming from. Like when he calls people out for recognition and stuff. I don't know what if people who haven't met him how it comes across like it's he's just putting on a show or whatever, using people as props. And I think
Mm.
when they accuse him of that, they don't realize that actually
Yeah.
this is really an authentic effort on his part to acknowledge someone who he feels merits that acknowledgement. He doesn't do props. You know, aside from maybe those women that, like the Paula Joneses of the world during the first Hillary Clinton
Oh.
debate, those are probably props. But the rest of the people that, like at the State of the Union the other night when
Yes.
that cancer survivor who was appointed an honorary member of the CIA,
Yeah.
things like that,
Mhm.
that unfortunately the other side couldn't even stand up for and acknowledge them. He really means it. And the difference is, it's authentic because when you've seen him often enough in private where the cameras aren't there, he's still doing that. When I gave a concert at
Mhm.
Bedminster at his golf club where he lives during the summertime, I give private concerts there.
Mhm.
And before my concert, there was a cocktail reception, and they had these girls performing like a string quartet, whatever. And it's just for ambiance. There are no solos. It's just an ambiance thing. People are eating dinner and whatever. Um, and he made sure to go over and to shake all of their hands and tell them what a
Wow.
wonderful job that they were doing. And
Wow.
I've been to a lot of events, and a lot of people far lower than the president of the United States have failed to acknowledge, like, these musicians that are often there to provide whatever ambiance and service, and and a lot of times it just flies under the radar, and no one's acknowledging anything. And, and here somebody who has the weight of the world on his shoulders and takes the time
Mm.
to do that. So for me, and there's no camera, there's no CNN, there's no Fox News guy. It's just a human thing that he does. And you ask his staff about him, any of the properties, they're all run the same way. They're world-class properties, but more than just the beauty of the materials and the landscapes and the marble and the gold. Are the values that you could feel are active on that property, as far as the staff and the service. And you ask them, okay, between you and me, how is the boss really, like, and yeah, just to see if they're gonna. And like, invariably they're just like amazing, because I've seen it, and it's not just the president. Even if I was, it's his kids too. The whole first family and all the senior staff are the same way. I was at Trump International, and I was getting lunch by the pool, and I ran into Eric. And this is 2 weeks before the election. 2 weeks,
Really?
maybe 10 days before the election. And I go to get lunch by the pool. I run into Eric, and he was very gracious, even though he had a million more important things to do than to speak to me, phone calls and interviews and this and that. And I let him be. I spoke to him for a few minutes, and I let him be. I let him do his thing. He was very busy. But I was a few tables away, so I was still close enough that when he got up to leave, he didn't just run out. He went to all the staff that were around and made
Mm.
sure that everybody was okay. Do you need
Wow.
anything? Is everything good? Do you have everything that you need to do the best job possible? Is there anything I could do for you? And again, in the context of an election, with the weight of the world, everybody trying to get these
Mhm.
people, and
Wow.
for him to be gracious to the staff in that way, it really struck me, because I was we were all aware of what they were going through, and for him to do that to just the frontline staff is just another example. And you look at the dichotomy, the difference between that, what I just told you, and the children of some other first families in our recent past, and what the dynamic is like with them, and what their history is. I mean, you're not going to find any laptops with the Trump kids with compromising
Yeah.
material on them. I bet my life on it. Okay, I would
I
bet my life
wasn't going to
on
say anything.
that.
Well, I know that,
Forget about it.
but like there's two different versions of Donald Trump. For instance, his granddaughter Kai really loves him. So she's like on Twitter and people are following her. But his sister Mary Trump, like she wrote a book called Too Much Is Never Enough, and she doesn't like her brother at all. And I'm like, what's the truth?
No, well, that's actually his niece.
Oh, Kai Trump is his. Oh, okay. I thought it
No,
was his
no, no,
granddaughter.
Mary.
I
That
thought
one
Mary.
that wrote that book that you're talking about.
Oh,
I
that's
think
right.
that's
Yeah,
his
you're right.
niece.
Mary Trump is his niece. You're right. Yeah.
And it's not. I can't really opine on what the family dynamics are. I
Mhm.
know what I've read on the subject, but it's. I mean, it's unfortunate, and she does have a different perspective, and I guess that's her right to say what it is that she thinks needs to be said. But I can tell you that my experience has not been consistent with those negative characterizations, and there's no reason. I mean, I'm a good singer and all, but there's really, I don't have $300 billion to lend to the campaign. There's really no reason to be extra nice to Chris Macchio, other than the fact that they're just that type of people. There's no reason to be loyal to me. I was not a huge celebrity like a Taylor Swift going into this thing, and so there's no reason for President Trump to even have chose me for the honor of performing at his events, including the inauguration, unless he just saw that merit, pure and simple.
That's
but
it, Chris.
but they don't owe, but there's the only reason that he would be disposed to be that generous is because that's just the type of guy that he is, and the person that he is, and that's the kind of family that they are. And again, they've been so generous and gracious with me, but it's not just me who can sing. It's anybody. It's anybody in their orbit that is loyal and that does the right thing. And so I think Kai is on the right side of things. It's Don's daughter, Don Jr.'s daughter, and also she's got a heck of a golf swing, from what I understand.
Wow.
I'm jealous. I don't know how to swing a club yet. I spend all these time at the Trump golf courses, and I haven't asked one of the pros to get me started. I'm a lefty. They'll have to dig up some lefty clubs, but that's another dream. Let's see. There's flying on Air Force One with the president. Oh yeah, and then shooting around a golf. But I'm not going to embarrass myself. So it might take me a little time before I even dare ask. What if I shoot a few holes with the with President Trump? But yeah, they've been great, and she's a beautiful, talented young lady, and I'm sure she's got a really bright future ahead of her. So I'm glad to see that.
Yeah.
And what I love, he does. He loves our country. He's put people who love our country, and he's putting our country first. And whoever sees this, should know that, don't believe what you see in the media, because it's just not true. At the end of the day, he's taking care of the people who live here. We should have been taken care of, but we've spent so many years going off in every different direction, and one man in less than 50, it's like 52 days, has done more than anyone. He's literally like James Brown when you look at it.
Yeah.
He literally is the hardest working man in show business.
Oh my God. He sleeps 4 hours a day, 4 to 5 hours a day. And he's lived that way his whole life. I mean,
wow.
12 a.m. or 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. That's it. That's the only sleep that man is getting. And he's able to do what he does. And not only that, but do it on, the McDonald's diet and charcoal well done steaks and Diet Coke. But he's amazing, and he's got he certainly puts my genetics to shame in terms of that. I mean, I'd be 500 pounds and have no energy, but he gets it done. He's I mean, the guy's a scratch golfer basically, and still manages to, save the world. So, what can we say but just be grateful, thankful that someone has our backs in this way, and is really in the process of undoing what I see as now almost 100 years of decay,
Yeah.
going back to FDR, who really, gave so much cure during the Depression that, he ended up undermining the patient in the long term. And, so, and that can happen, good intentions can go too far, and then it sets us up for long-term decay. And so, I think we have an opportunity to reestablish common sense. And don't forget, like, even for him, it's like, he himself, people don't need to to look at what President Trump is doing as something that he is inventing out of thin air and attribute it all to, well, this is just his, you know some crazy vision that he came up with out of the ether. What he's doing is he just has the guts and the fortitude to reestablish what had worked for, again, hundreds and thousands of years of common sense in our civilization. He's not really a rigid ideologue. There are people in the party that are. He does what works. And if it happens to be, conservative, thought of as conservative, then so be it. But that's not his preoccupation. So, people who get all hung up on the personality part, as much as I love the personality and the people in his orbit love his personality, people really need to, when they're evaluating its merits, get past that and just say, is what what he's doing, is that representative of common sense? Is this how, the country became a world power, in the late 19th century, when our industrial revolution was in full swing? Do his policies kind of sound like the policies that were in place during when America was becoming a wealthy nation? And if the answer is yes, which it is, then let him do his thing. Let's go back to what worked, and remove the toxins from the body politic and our nation's corpus. Remove those toxins. That's all. And so, that's my message to people who really get hung up on, if they happen to subjectively not be enthralled with the personality part of it. It's just common sense. If you might like the taste of the medicine, and you might not like the taste of the medicine, but don't argue with the utility of the medicine.
Exactly.
And then common sense is the one fundamental that we just don't have anymore, but we're getting back very slowly. We take all these things for granted. Think about it. When you wake up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, whatever faith you are, or there's some people who don't believe in anything, but you take for granted simple things like turning on the water and there's water there.
Right.
You have a roof over your head, you clothes on your back, you're healthy. There are people that don't have these things, and they would do anything to be in your shoes. And with you and there's
nothing you could say about Trump to dissuade that person from coming here at the first opportunity. Oh, you don't want to come here? Oh no, you follow Rosie O'Donnell's example. This is a bad country. The guy's gonna be like, I'm eating rocks, right? Okay. I was going digging earlier for roots in the desert, so I'll I think, but this is the hubris of entitlement that where we really need to move beyond. Just like I have realized as an artist that it's not about me. These young people, these fellow citizens of ours, need to realize, it's not about themselves either. So,
and I think it'd be safe enough for me to say this. that you would say to any up and coming artist to stay real, stay humble, and stay true to thyself? When
Yes,
when
yeah.
when,
Stay
when
true
a,
to thyself. Always be open to new information and new perspectives. But in other words, don't be afraid to evolve yourself and as you process new information. But it needs to be your own process and your own decisions about and choices about who you want to be and what you want to represent in this world, and don't let any external influence exert undue pressure for you
ooh,
to conform. That's the
Okay,
main
Mr.
thing.
Norkowich. Okay, Mr. Norkowich, do you have one final question for him? Because I got one.
yeah, I've got one. Just so in the classical crossover genre, right? There are male, female, but in the scope of just people you work with or haven't worked with, let's
And
focus
by
on
the way, only that. Only those two choices, by the way.
no. Well, I wanted to say, okay, how about this? In an idealistic world, who would you actually love to do a duet with? What song and why?
Yes.
Wait,
Love that
living or
question.
dead? Is this one of those?
Well, well, let's do living. Let's do living.
Well, okay, so living, I would probably say, like, just from uh, a vocal standpoint, I'd love to do a duet with either Lara Fabian or
Yes. My
Celine
favorite.
Dion, or
Oh,
Celine
yes.
Dion, who
Yes.
so
Lara's good.
they're similar singers. Lara Fabian
Hmm.
is
Yep.
a little bit warmer and rounder in tone, and
Hmm.
but they have like a similar quality to them. They just like there's an intensity, there's a passion. They just leave it all out there, and so um, I would love to do a duet with either of those fine young ladies. And of course, if I had the opportunity to do a duet with a guy too, that's great. But as the male female dichotomy is particularly powerful, and so if I could do like the prayer or adagio
Oh,
or something like that
Wow.
with one of these people, that would definitely be something I would find extremely fulfilling. Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
take that.
Okay, Jem,
Oh yeah.
let's wrap this up. So, the final question, you're going to love this question. So, what legacy do you, Christopher Macchio, do you hope to leave in the world of classical crossover music?
Well, I guess. Well, first of all, I want to, in addition to pursuing classical crossover as it's narrowly construed, I want to be successful enough to reach the widest audience possible, and really to expose people to this art form, and to make them, again, just provide additional opportunities for them to feel something meaningful, um, to be emotionally moved and to feel ennobled by it. Um, and also, I have all in parallel to the quote unquote classical crossover genre, I have also um, refocused on developing my just hardcore opera classical repertoire. And so I want to be remembered from a legacy standpoint as not necessarily I I'll it would be great enough to be considered a compelling jack of all trades in that space, but I also endeavor to achieve a high level of refinement and success in those subgenres that kind of comprise the crossover space. So, you know, if I could ever have a blues hit, if I could ever have an R&B hit, if I could ever have a straight legitimate opera hit, or an 80s love, ballad type of hit, just that stand on their own and say, wow, he wasn't just somebody who kind of did a lot of different things decently or reasonably well, but he actually
Mhm.
achieved the pinnacle in some of these different categories. That, from a legacy standpoint, and as far as impact, that would be like the qualitative judgment assessment. But as far as impact, I would like them to say, that was a guy that was part of that renewal of the arts. That
Mm.
that guy is one of those artists during that critical period in the 2020s and the 2030s where, the pendulum began to swing the other way, and beauty and uplifting and ennobling sensibilities were brought back into the central space in the public fora and in our cultural scene, a cultural landscape, and it was no longer about sex and winking at satanic secular, satanic whatever. It's like, no, we're going back to things being wholesome and beautiful and and with dignity and grace. And that guy was, he's on that short list of artists that represents that the best.
I got a great epitaph for you, Christopher. Somebody's walking past your grave, looks at it, says Christopher Macchio, and it says, "You are where I once was. I am where you will be."
Well, I'm actually hoping to get my name on that Social Security list where I get to live to 360 years old. So
I heard about that.
I'm not ready to write my epitaph just yet, because I'm hoping to be having this conversation in the year, from my condo on Mars, courtesy of Elon. It's a little windy out. I'm looking. It's very. They say I'm orange. It's orange outside. It's just the air. It's the landscape.
That was a good one.
There. No, but...
James does a great impression as well. That's awesome. I love it.
Oh yeah.
So,
we'll
anything
see.
else, Jim? Anything else, Jim? Because I'm going to end it here.
I just can't wait to see what you're going to do next, and opening up this this whole, starting at January 20th was the beginning of the end of the old regime, and it's nice.
Yes.
It's nice to be in a country where we have someone who everybody he brings into the landscape, loves the country as well. And, when he chose you, I see why he chose you. And we've had this time to be intimate with you and to get to know who you are.
Thank you so much.
You're an amazing man, and you're a real man.
Yeah.
And that's who President Trump surrounds himself with, and people, in the cabinet and in his businesses outside. And it's kind of like the model and the method that's how we should treat each other, how we want to be treated. And, unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of people to get the message. But
that's an important caveat to all of this. Is I hope to play a role, but it's also going to take the effort of a lot of other folks to bring this thing home and to full fruition. And everybody's really got to get on board with just celebrating life and celebrating one another and all of our talents in an uplifting way. And just amplifying that through all the different dimensions of our culture as best we can. I think that, like you said, that January 20th is the beginning of the end of the decay, and now we can focus on the restoration and
The
you
healing.
know, yeah, and the healing, and he chose "Oh America" as the first song that I performed at the beginning of the inaugural ceremony. It was actually written by the same guy who wrote "You Raise Me Up,"
Oh yeah.
and yeah, an Irish composer, and that was also an effort to help unite the country behind those shared values that we know always existed and still do exist underneath all the chaos. Republicans and Democrats never had to disagree before on the merits of our country. It was really more of a, who are you with, the union or management, and that was the essential dichotomy for such a long time. And it was taken for granted that we all waved the flag. And now for that to have been called into question in recent decades, it's just it's not the way to go. And so that song was part of bringing us back to okay, it's okay to disagree on some of the details, but on the foundation of what it means to be a human, and on the foundation of what it means to be an American, on this we cannot disagree. We need to be on the same page with that. And I think we have an opportunity now to get on the same page.
And
Thank you so much.
I was going to say, and again, that's what our initiative is, and that's what we're gonna keep on pressing forward each and every single day, and
that's right.
each and every day will be better than the next.
Christopher, I want to thank you.
And people who by the way, people who disagree with us on certain of these details, just don't disagree with us on how wonderful it is to be a human being and how wonderful it is to be an American. Because if we can agree on that much, then we'll work out the rest of the details. We will.
Well, thank you, Christopher, for being so generous with your time. And everyone who is joining us on the OnStage podcast, we hope you enjoyed the conversation. I found out that 96% of you are not subscribed to this channel. So hit the subscribe button, share this podcast, like and subscribe, and we love it. I had something else to say, too. Okay, we'll end it here. Just skipped my mind. Anyway, thank you so much, Jim, for being my co-host tonight.
Oh, quite welcome.
Such a pleasure to meet you guys. Thank you so much for having me on to promote this show, of course, at the Paramount on March 29th. Tickets, by the way, can be purchased ParamountNewYork.com. Just get that website, ParamountNewYork.com, NY, ParamountNY.com. Get those tickets. Get those tickets. First of many to come with Live Nation.
Well, Chris, I want to post this on Thursday. Complete, not edit. So you're going to see it
wonderful.
Next Thursday, because also tomorrow's my birthday, and it's appropriate because you want to get it up before the 29th. So you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It was great to interview this. Oh, shout out to Christopher Macchio. Really appreciate your generosity setting up this amazing opportunity with Christopher Macchio, who's not related to Ralph, by the way, in case you ask.
Not that I know of.
Okay, so until next time, keep the music alive. Thank you, Jim. So wait right there, guys. I'm gonna end this. See you, Jim.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hold on one second.
Take care.